The abduction. Jason Carter was walking home late at night. The streets were empty, the air was cold, and the only sound was the soft crunch of his boots on the pavement. He had just finished his shift at the local diner and was looking forward to getting some rest. His small apartment was only a few blocks away. As he turned a corner, a strange feeling washed over him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. It was as if someone, or something, was watching him. He stopped and looked around, but there was nothing. The streetlights flickered for a moment, casting long shadows on the ground. Then, without warning, a bright blue light exploded in the sky above him. It was blinding, like staring into the sun. Jason threw his arms over his face, stumbling backward. His body felt heavy, like gravity itself had doubled. His legs wouldn't move. His breath came in short gasps as a strange humming sound filled his ears. "Dolly, what's happening?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The light grew stronger, wrapping around him like a cage. He tried to scream, but his voice was lost in the overwhelming energy. His feet left the ground. Panic surged through his veins as he realized he was floating. The world around him spun in a blur of colors. The city disappeared, the street vanished, and suddenly he was surrounded by pure emptiness. It felt like he was being pulled through a tunnel of light. His body tingled, his mind screamed for an explanation, but before he could process anything, darkness. Jason woke up with a sharp gasp. His body ached, and his head felt like it had been hit by a truck. Slowly, he opened his eyes. He wasn't on Earth anymore. The ceiling above him glowed softly, made of some kind of shimmering metal. The walls around him pulsed with faint blue light, like they were alive. The air was thick with a strange, sweet scent. He tried to move, but his arms were restrained by invisible force bands around his wrists. He was lying on a floating bed, suspended in midair. Panic surged through him again. He struggled, but the restraints didn't budge. Then he heard voices, soft, melodic, almost hypnotic. The voices were female, speaking in a language he didn't understand. But within seconds, his mind adjusted, and suddenly, he could comprehend every word. "He is awake. He is even more beautiful than we expected." Jason turned his head. Two figures stood at the foot of his bed, tall, elegant, and completely alien. They were identical, two women with smooth violet skin that shimmered under the soft light. Their silver hair flowed down their backs like liquid metal. Their eyes, glowing emerald green, watched him with amusement and curiosity. They wore form-fitting suits made of a material that seemed to shift and change, adapting to their movements. Jason swallowed hard. His heart pounded in his chest. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice hoarse. One of the women stepped closer. Her movements were graceful and fluid, almost like she was gliding. She reached out and touched the air near his arm. Instantly, the restraints vanished. "You are safe," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "You have been chosen." "Chosen?" Jason repeated, sitting up quickly. His muscles ached, but he ignored the pain. He needed answers. "Chosen for what? Who are you?" The second twin smiled. "I am Kivis. This is my sister, Zilara. We are the princesses of the Vaetheri Empire." Jason rubbed his temples. His mind was still spinning. Aliens. He had been kidnapped by aliens. "I don't understand," he muttered. "Why am I here? What do you want from me?" Zilara tilted her head, her green eyes glowing a little brighter. "You, Jason Carter, are special. Your kind is fascinating." Kivis stepped closer, brushing her fingers lightly along his arm. Her touch sent a strange warmth through his skin. "Human males are rare in this part of the galaxy. And you are perfect." Jason pulled his arm away, standing up from the floating bed. "Perfect for what?" he demanded. The twins exchanged a look. Then, at the same time, they smiled. "You are to be our mate," Zilara said softly. Jason froze. His brain struggled to process the words. He let out a nervous laugh. That's a joke, right? Kaivis's expression remained calm. It is no joke. We have searched many systems. Your genetics are strong. You will bond with us. Together, we will create the future of our empire. Jason took a step back, shaking his head. No, no way. I don't care what kind of empire you have. I'm not some alien husband. Zilara sighed, as if she expected this reaction. You will understand in time. For now, rest. Before Jason could react, Kaivis raised her hand. A soft blue wave of energy surrounded him, and his eyelids grew heavy. His body refused to move. Wait. Darkness swallowed him once again. Jason didn't know how long he was unconscious. When he woke up, he was in a different room. This one was larger, more extravagant. The walls were lined with floating crystals, casting a soft, shifting glow. Strange, otherworldly music played in the background. The door opened, and the twins stepped inside. They were smiling, but this time, their expressions held something more. Possession. Jason's stomach twisted. He was trapped in a world far beyond his own, and two powerful alien princesses had already claimed him as theirs, and they had no intention of letting him go. Welcome to the alien palace. Jason awoke with a sharp breath, his heart hammering inside his chest. His vision was blurry at first, but as it cleared, he realized he was no longer in the glowing white room. He sat up, his body tense, his muscles aching from whatever alien sedative they had used on him. His breathing slowed as he took in his new surroundings. The room was breathtaking, massive and elegant, yet utterly alien. The walls shimmered with soft, shifting colors, as if they were alive, reacting to his presence. The floor was smooth, but not cold, more like polished glass infused with warmth. A strange, gentle breeze moved through the space, carrying a scent that reminded him of fresh rain and something faintly floral. Everything around him looked like something out of a dream, or a very expensive sci-fi movie. In the center of the room was a massive floating bed, draped with dark violet fabric that shifted in color every time he blinked. Floating crystals lined the walls, glowing softly, humming in an almost musical rhythm. Jason swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, his balance a little shaky. His mind was racing. He needed to escape. His last memory was of the alien twins, Zilara and Kaivis, telling him that he had been chosen as their mate. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Not happening, he muttered. He turned toward what looked like a door, except there was no visible handle, no buttons, nothing. Just smooth metal. He ran his hands over it, looking for some kind of mechanism, but before he could explore further, a soft whooshing sound filled the room. Jason spun around just as the door slid open. There they were. Zilara and Kaivis entered, walking in perfect sync, their glowing emerald eyes locked onto him. Good, Kaivis said, tilting her head slightly. You're awake. Jason took a step back, trying to keep his breathing steady. His instincts screamed at him to run. But where? Zilara smiled, the corner of her lips curling in amusement. There is no need to be afraid, Jason. We have not harmed you. Jason clenched his fists. You kidnapped me, took me from my home. How do you expect me to react? Kaivis sighed, as if dealing with an impatient child. It was necessary. Necessary? Jason barked. For what? What the hell do you want from me? The twins exchanged a glance, and then, as if on cue, the walls around them shifted. Jason gasped as the once smooth walls morphed into something new, a holographic display showing entire planets, star systems, and massive alien fleets. The images moved rapidly, displaying a great empire filled with countless species. Then, the images changed, zooming in on a planet, a dying world. Jason frowned as he watched massive cities in ruins, desolate wastelands stretching for miles. There were no people, Just empty, abandoned structures. Zilara stepped forward, her voice softer now. This is our homeworld, Vathar. Jason turned toward her, his mind still processing the scene. What happened to it? Kives's expression darkened. We are a powerful species, but we are dying. Jason swallowed hard. What do you mean? Zilara's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Our genetics are breaking down. For centuries, we have only bred within our kind, but it has led to complications. Our people are growing weaker. Each generation is less fertile, less resilient. Jason's mouth went dry. He was starting to see where this was going. Kives took a step closer. We searched many worlds. Your kind is different, strong, adaptive, the perfect match for our bloodline. Jason stiffened. So you kidnapped me because you think I can fix your dying species? Zilara nodded. Yes. Jason let out a sharp laugh. No, absolutely not. I don't care how desperate you are. You can't just abduct people and force them to be part of your crazy alien breeding program. Kives's expression remained unreadable. You misunderstand. We do not force. We persuade. Jason scoffed. Oh yeah, by drugging me and keeping me locked in a floating prison. Zilara sighed. You do not realize your position, Jason. You are not a prisoner. Jason crossed his arms. Oh really? Then let me leave. Silence. The twins exchanged another look. Kives took another slow step toward him, her gaze piercing. We could have taken any human, but we chose you. Jason narrowed his eyes. Why? Zilara smiled again, her voice like silk. Because you are special, Jason. Your DNA is unique, unlike the others we tested. Jason felt a chill crawl down his spine. Wait, others. Kives's smile widened, revealing teeth that were a little too sharp. Oh yes, we have tried before, but they were not compatible. They did not survive. Jason's blood ran cold. What do you mean, they didn't survive? Zilara's expression turned almost sad. The genetic bonding process is delicate. If the host's body rejects the link, they deteriorate. Jason took a step back. His heart was pounding in his chest. This wasn't just about mating. This was something far worse. You expect me to bond with you? Jason asked, his voice shaking slightly. Kives nodded. Yes, and we will give you everything in return. Power, wealth, immortality. You will be worshipped as the father of a new generation. Jason clenched his fists. And if I refuse? Zilara sighed. Then, we will find another way to persuade you. Jason's mind raced. He had to find a way out. He had to escape. Before it was too late. The reason behind the kidnapping. Jason's mind raced. His pulse pounded in his ears as the weight of the situation settled onto his shoulders. This wasn't just about him. This wasn't some bizarre alien romance story. This was something much darker. Zilara and Kives had kidnapped other humans before him, and they had died trying to resist. He needed to get out. Now. But first, he had to understand what he was dealing with. Jason took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. You keep saying I'm special. What makes me different from the others? Kives studied him for a moment before stepping toward a panel on the wall. She pressed her palm against it, and a holographic screen flickered into existence. Jason's breath caught as images began to appear. Faces. Human faces. Men. Women. Some of them looked terrified. Others looked peaceful. Some looked dead. Zilara's voice was soft, almost regretful. These were our previous attempts. We brought them here in hopes of creating a lasting bond, but their biology rejected the process. Jason's throat tightened. Process? What process? Kives waved her hand, and suddenly the screen changed. DNA sequences, complex genetic maps, and molecular structures filled the air in glowing symbols Jason couldn't fully understand. Zilara turned toward him. Our species has reached a breaking point. We are no longer able to reproduce naturally. Our genetics have weakened after thousands of years of selective breeding. The children we do have are frail, sickly, or worse. Kaivis gestured to the hologram, zooming in on a swirling double helix. Humans, however, are different. You have survived through chaos, war, disease. Your DNA adapts, evolves. It is strong. Jason's stomach twisted. So, what? You think mixing your DNA with mine will fix your species? Zilara nodded. It is our only hope. Jason swallowed hard. He could feel the trap closing around him. They weren't just expecting him to stay. They needed him to stay. Why me? Jason pressed. Why not some scientist or a genetic expert? Why not someone who actually knows how this stuff works? Kaivis gave him a knowing smile. Because this is not about knowledge, Jason. It is about instinct. We searched for someone whose genetic structure would not only survive the process, but embrace it. Your body is already reacting to our presence, is it not? Jason's fists clenched. He hated to admit it, but there was a strange pull between them, an unnatural attraction that sent shivers through his veins. What had they done to him? He forced himself to stay focused. And if I refuse? Zilara sighed, stepping closer. Then we will find another way to make you stay. Jason backed away. His heart pounded. He needed a plan. Now, the test subject. Before Jason could say another word, a soft beep echoed through the room. Kaivis turned toward the panel again. The results are in. Jason tensed. Results. Zilara's green eyes shimmered. Your compatibility test. Jason watched as the holographic display zoomed in on his genetic structure. Kaivis tapped the air, and a strange golden glow surrounded his DNA model. The alien text shifted rapidly, rearranging itself into something Jason could read. 100% compatibility. Jason's breath hitched. What does that mean? He asked slowly. Kaivis turned toward him, her expression unreadable. It means you are the perfect match. Jason stared at the screen, his mind reeling. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. He wasn't some chosen one in an alien breeding experiment. This was insane. I don't believe it, he said, shaking his head. This is a mistake. Zilara smiled softly. It is not a mistake, Jason. You were meant for us. For this. Jason felt sick. He had to get out. Escape plan. Jason needed information. He needed to know how this place worked, what kind of security it had, how the technology functioned, and most importantly, how to disable whatever tracking systems they had on him. But first, he had to play along. Jason took a deep breath and forced his voice to stay calm. Okay, let's say I believe you. What happens now? Kaivis's expression brightened, and Zilara relaxed slightly. Now, she said, we prepare you for the bonding process. Jason forced a smile. Great. Can I get a tour of this place first? Kaivis chuckled. Curious, aren't you? Well, Jason shrugged. If I'm going to be here for a while, I might as well know where I'm staying. Zilara exchanged a glance with her sister and nodded. Very well. But you will have a guard escort. Jason gritted his teeth. That complicated things. Still, this was his chance. If he could map out the layout, he might find a way to escape. The forbidden hallway. Jason followed the two princesses as they led him through the massive palace ship. It was breathtaking. Glowing pathways, floating platforms, translucent walls revealing endless stars. Dozens of alien figures moved around them. Some humanoid, some massive and insect-like, others so strange Jason couldn't even begin to describe them. Everywhere he looked, he saw advanced technology, things that should have been impossible. But then, something caught his eye. A sealed door. It was different from the others, thicker, heavily reinforced, and glowing with an eerie blue light. And most importantly, It was guarded. Jason slowed his steps. His instincts screamed at him. Something important was behind that door. He glanced at Solara. "What's in there?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Nothing that concerns you," Kaivis answered smoothly. Jason filed that away. That room was his way out. A dangerous ally. That night, as Jason lay in his floating bed, his mind churned. He had one chance to escape, and he knew exactly where he needed to go. But he couldn't do it alone. If he was going to break free, he needed help. Someone who could bypass security. Someone on the inside. And there was only one person he could think of. Zilara. She wasn't like Kaivis. He had sensed it from the start. There was hesitation in her. Uncertainty. She didn't want to hurt him. Jason turned onto his side, staring at the glowing ceiling. Tomorrow, he would test his theory. Tomorrow, he would convince Zilara to help him escape. And if he was wrong, then he was already dead. The escape attempt. Jason lay in his floating bed, staring at the shimmering ceiling. His mind raced through every possible scenario, calculating risks, formulating a plan. Everything hinged on Zilara. She was the weaker link between the two sisters. Unlike Kaivis, who radiated cold authority, Zilara hesitated. She wasn't fully convinced about keeping him here. Jason had sensed it in her voice, in the way her eyes flickered when Kaivis spoke for both of them. He had one chance. He had to turn her against her sister. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Tomorrow, he would act. The unlikely conversation. The next morning, Jason was taken to what the twins called the observation chamber. It was a vast, open balcony with an enormous transparent wall overlooking space. The planet Vathar, their dying homeworld, loomed in the distance, its surface scarred with crimson cracks and storm-covered wastelands. Zilara stood beside him, her arms folded. Kaivis was absent for once. Jason took his chance. "You don't agree with your sister, do you?" Zilara didn't respond immediately. She kept her gaze on the planet, her glowing emerald eyes unreadable. Jason pressed on. "If you did, you wouldn't have hesitated when I asked about that locked room." She finally looked at him, her expression neutral. "That room is not for you to worry about, Jason. But it's important, isn't it?" He insisted. "What's inside?" She turned away, avoiding his gaze. "Something that would change how you see us." Jason narrowed his eyes. "You keep saying you're giving me a choice, but we both know that's not true. If you really believed in what Kaivis is doing, you wouldn't be afraid of me learning the truth." Zilara exhaled, her shoulders tensing. "I am not afraid." "Then prove it," Jason challenged. "Tell me the truth. Help me." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, she whispered, "Meet me tonight." Jason's pulse quickened. He had her. Secrets of the Forbidden Hallway. That night, Jason waited. His heart pounded as the sleek metallic door to his room slid open without a sound. Zilara stepped inside, her silver hair glowing under the dim lights. She didn't speak. Instead, she gestured for him to follow. Jason slipped out of his bed and trailed after her. They moved through the corridors in silence, shadows flickering along the walls as they passed glowing panels and softly humming energy cores. They reached the forbidden door. Zilara placed her palm against the smooth surface, and with a soft hum, the security locks disengaged. The door slid open. Jason stepped inside and immediately felt sick. Rows of pods lined the dark room. Inside each pod, a human was floating in an eerie golden liquid. Men, women, young, old, all unconscious. Jason's stomach twisted. What is this?" Zilara hesitated, then spoke softly. "Failed experiments." Jason turned to her, his hands curling into fists. "You've been doing this for how long?" Zilara's expression darkened. "Kaivis has. For decades, every human brought here was tested. But none of them were compatible like you. The bonding process, it destroyed them. Jason's blood ran cold. And you let this happen. She looked away, guilt flickering across her face. I never wanted this. But our people are desperate. If our species dies, billions will be lost. Jason grabbed her arm. Zilara, listen to me. You know this isn't right. This isn't survival. This is murder. She met his gaze, her expression conflicted. What do you want me to do? Jason's jaw clenched. Help me escape. A tense moment passed. Then, finally, she nodded. The great escape begins. Zilara led him through the twisting corridors, avoiding patrols and security drones that floated silently like mechanical sentinels. They reached a transportation hub, a vast hangar bay filled with sleek, black ships shaped like arrowheads. Zilara gestured toward a small scout vessel. That ship is unmarked. It can get you back to Earth. Jason's chest tightened. He was so close. But then, a sharp alarm blared. Jason's stomach dropped. What? Zilara's eyes widened. Kevis knows. A voice crackled through the speakers, cold and furious. Zilara, I am disappointed in you. Jason turned toward the far end of the hangar. The doors slid open, and Kevis stood there, flanked by heavily armed guards. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Kevis said smoothly, stepping forward. Dear sister, you disappoint me. Jason cursed under his breath. He wasn't getting out that easily. The fight for freedom. Kevis raised her hand. The guards charged forward, weapons glowing with pulsating energy. Jason grabbed a nearby metal rod and swung wildly, knocking one of them back. Zilara moved like lightning, twisting and turning, disabling two guards with a single strike. Go, she shouted. Jason sprinted toward the scout ship, but Kevis moved faster. Before he could reach the cockpit, Kevis was in front of him, her glowing eyes locked onto his. You don't understand, Jason, she said softly. You belong with us. You were chosen. Jason's breathing was ragged. I choose my own fate. Kevis's eyes flashed bright green. The air around him rippled. His body froze. Pain exploded through his mind, as if something was pushing into his consciousness. Submit. Jason gritted his teeth. Kevis was inside his head. Submit, Jason. Accept your place. Jason's vision blurred. His limbs felt heavy. His thoughts slowed. No. He fought against the pressure, forcing his mind to resist. And then, a gunshot. The pressure vanished. Jason gasped as Kevis staggered backward, clutching her side. Zilara stood behind her, holding a stolen weapon, her eyes fierce. Jason, go. He didn't hesitate. He lunged into the cockpit, slamming his hands against the controls. The ship roared to life, energy surging through its core. Outside, Zilara was holding off the remaining guards, her silver hair whipping around her as she fired shot after shot. Jason's hands flew over the controls, engaging the launch sequence. The ship shook violently as the docking clamps disengaged. Zilara turned toward him, her emerald eyes locking onto his one last time. And then, Jason punched the thrusters. The scout ship shot out of the hangar at blinding speed, racing through the void of space. Jason exhaled sharply, watching the palace ship shrink behind him. He had escaped. But deep inside, he knew this wasn't over, because as long as Kevis lived, she would never stop hunting him. The betrayal and unexpected ally. Jason's hands clenched the controls as the stolen scout ship hurtled through the void of space. His breathing was ragged, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He had done it. He had escaped. But he wasn't safe. Not yet. The massive Vaetheri palace ship was shrinking behind him. But Jason knew Kevis wasn't done with him. She was too smart, too ruthless, and she had an entire empire at her command. The ship's console flickered to life, alien symbols scrolling across the screen. Jason frowned, his mind struggling to process the unfamiliar language. He reached for the navigation controls, but beep, beep, beep. An alarm blared. His stomach lurched. Incoming transmission. Jason hesitated. His fingers hovered over the controls. Then the holographic display flickered, and Kivas's face appeared. The warning from Kivas. Jason. Kivas's voice was calm, but there was something dangerous beneath it. Turn the ship around. Jason's jaw clenched. Not happening. Kivas sighed, as if he was being difficult. You don't understand, do you? You are not just running from me. You are running from fate. Jason scoffed. Yeah. Well, fate can go to hell. Kivas's green eyes flashed. You are marked, Jason. No matter where you run, I will find you. Jason's fingers tightened around the controls. Try me. Kivas smiled. Too calm. Too confident. Very well, she murmured. Let's see how long you survive. The transmission cut out. Jason exhaled sharply. But the relief didn't last. The ship's HUD flickered, displaying multiple red blips. Pursuers. Jason cursed. Kivas had already sent ships after him. A desperate maneuver. The scout ship was fast, but Jason had no idea how to fly it properly. The controls were completely alien, but he had no choice. The enemy ships were gaining on him. They weren't firing yet, probably because Kivas wanted him alive. That gave him one chance. He scanned the navigation panel. There, a nearby asteroid field. Jason gritted his teeth. It was a terrible idea. But terrible ideas were all he had left. He dived toward the asteroid belt, pushing the ship to its limits. The controls fought against him, warning lights flashing as he weaved between massive, tumbling space rocks. The enemy ships hesitated for a moment, then followed. Jason's heart pounded. He twisted the controls, forcing the scout ship into a tight spin. A massive asteroid loomed ahead, and he barely managed to swerve in time. The enemy wasn't so lucky. One of Kivas's ships clipped the asteroid, spinning wildly before exploding in a burst of blue fire. Jason let out a breath. One down, two to go. He pulled the ship into a steep dive, threading through the dense debris. The enemy ships stayed on him, but Jason could tell they weren't as skilled at maneuvering in tight spaces. Good. Jason spotted a narrow gap between two colliding asteroids. It was just barely wide enough for his ship. If he timed it right, Jason pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot through the gap, narrowly avoiding impact. One of the enemy ships tried to follow. It wasn't fast enough. The two asteroids crashed together, crushing the ship in an instant. Jason didn't waste time celebrating. One ship left. The last pursuer was smarter. It stayed back, waiting for Jason to make a mistake. Jason frowned. He had to even the playing field. His eyes darted toward the ship's weapons system. He had no idea how it worked, but he slammed his hand onto the console. A pulse of blue energy erupted from the ship's rear cannons, hitting a nearby asteroid. The rocks splintered, sending a storm of debris flying backward. The last enemy ship *** tried to dodge. ***, but a massive fragment slammed into its wing, sending it spiraling out of control. Jason exhaled shakily as the explosion faded behind him. He had won. For now. A dangerous signal. Jason knew he had to keep moving. He set a course for Earth, the navigation system guiding him toward the familiar blue planet. But as he drifted through space, another alarm blared. Jason's stomach dropped. Not another pursuer. No, this was something worse. It was a distress signal, and it was coming from Zilara. Jason stared at the screen, his mind racing. She was still on the palace ship, still under Kivas's control. His instincts screamed at him. She helped you escape. Leave her. You owe her nothing. But deep down, Jason knew he couldn't. Zilara had risked everything for him. And now, she was in trouble. Jason's hands hovered over the controls. He had a choice. He could go home, return to Earth, and leave this nightmare behind. Or he could turn back, go after Zilara, and finish this. A decision that changes everything. Jason closed his eyes. Then he made his choice. He turned the ship around, back toward the palace ship, back toward danger, back toward Kaivis. And this time, he wouldn't be running. This time, he was going to end it. The Great Escape, confronting the Queen. Jason's hands tightened around the controls as he piloted the stolen scout ship back toward the palace ship. It was a terrible idea. A suicide mission. But Zilara's distress signal still blinked on the screen, pulsing like a heartbeat. She had helped him escape. Now, she was trapped. And Jason wasn't going to leave her behind. He exhaled sharply, bracing himself. All right, Kaivis. Let's finish this. Sneaking back into the lion's den. As Jason approached the massive alien vessel, his stolen ship's warning system blared. Kaivis had activated a planetary lockdown. A massive energy barrier now surrounded the palace ship. Anything that approached without authorization would be instantly vaporized. Jason cursed under his breath. He couldn't just fly in. He needed a way inside. His mind raced. He scanned the ship's systems, looking for anything useful. Then, he found it. A cloaking function. His eyes widened. This ship was equipped with stealth tech. That's how the Vaetheri captured humans, undetected. They could disappear at will. Jason activated the cloak and held his breath as the ship shimmered out of view. He drifted closer, moving carefully through the blockade. The energy barrier remained still. No alarms triggered. It was working. He aimed for the lower docking bay, where smaller vessels landed. His ship slipped undetected into the hangar, weaving between massive alien warships. Jason's hands were sweating. One wrong move, and he was dead. Finally, he landed. The moment the ship touched down, Jason powered it off. He had to move quickly. He grabbed the only weapon he could find, a small plasma pistol, and slipped out of the cockpit. Now, the real challenge began. Navigating the enemy's fortress. The hangar was enormous. Rows of ships, armed guards, and blinking security drones filled the space. Jason moved fast, ducking behind crates, sticking to the shadows. His heart pounded as he spotted two alien soldiers patrolling nearby. Their sleek armor gleamed under the dim blue lights. Jason crouched lower, trying to stay out of sight. He watched as the guards walked past, speaking in their melodic alien tongue. Then he heard something chilling. The human has returned. Jason's stomach dropped. Kaivis already knew he was here. He needed to move. Now, finding Zilara. Jason weaved through the corridors, his mind racing. If Kaivis knew he was back, that meant Zilara was still alive. But for how long? He tapped into the stolen ship's internal map, displaying the palace layout. He searched for confinement zones, looking for where they'd keep a traitor like Zilara. Then, he found it. Sector 7, High Security Detainment. Jason sprinted down the corridors, avoiding roaming patrols. Every step felt heavier. Every second counted. Finally, he reached the holding cells. Inside, dozens of alien prisoners were locked behind shimmering force fields. Some looked human. Others were species he had never seen before. And then, at the far end, Zilara. She was on her knees, arms bound behind her back, her silver hair tangled and blood dripping from her lip. Jason's fists clenched. Kaivis had beaten her, but Zilara was still alive. The rescue. Jason rushed to the cell controls, his fingers flying over the alien console. The force field flickered. Zilara looked up, her green eyes widening in shock. Jason. What? No time to talk, he muttered, deactivating her restraints. Can you walk? Zilara pushed herself up, wincing. Barely, but I can fight. Jason handed her the plasma pistol. Then let's get the hell out of here. But before they could move, a slow, deliberate clap echoed through the chamber. Jason's blood ran cold. He turned around. And there she was, Kivas, flanked by heavily armed guards. Her emerald eyes glowed dangerously. "You disappoint me, Jason," she said smoothly. "I expected you to run home to Earth, not crawl back here like a fool." Jason tightened his grip on the pistol. "Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises." Kivas smiled. "So am I." She raised her hand. A wave of energy blasted out. Jason barely dodged, the force sending him crashing into the wall. His vision blurred. Zilara fired, but Kivas was too fast. She twisted her hand, and Zilara was flung backward by an invisible force. Jason gasped for air, pushing himself up. What the hell was that? Kivas stepped forward, power radiating off her. "You still don't understand, do you?" Jason gritted his teeth. "Then make me understand." Kivas's expression turned almost sad. "You were never meant to leave, Jason. You were meant to become something greater." She raised her other hand, and suddenly, Jason's body locked up. His veins burned. His mind exploded with memories that weren't his. He saw visions of the Vathery's past, of wars, destruction, experiments on countless humans. And then, he saw himself, a different version of himself, stronger, taller, changed. His blood was already altering. Jason's breath hitched. They had done something to him. Even after escaping, he was already transforming. The final gamble. Jason fought back, clenching his fists, trying to push Kivas out of his mind. "You're lying," he growled. Kivas tilted her head. "Am I?" Jason's pulse raced. His muscles burned. His skin felt hotter. What if she wasn't lying? No, he wouldn't let them control him. Jason gritted his teeth and reached for his last resort, a stolen explosive he had grabbed from the hangar. Kivas's eyes flickered in realization. Jason. Boom. The explosion ripped through the chamber. Smoke filled the air. Sirens blared. Jason grabbed Zilara, yanking her up. "Run." They raced through the corridors, alarms blaring, guards shouting behind them. Jason's stolen ship was still docked. If they could make it. A guard lunged at Jason. Jason punched him, but his fist hit harder than expected. The guard *** flew backward. ***, slamming into the wall with unnatural force. Jason froze. He wasn't just stronger. His body was changing. Zilara saw his expression. "Jason, what's happening to you?" He didn't have time to answer. They reached the ship. Jason shoved Zilara inside and fired the thrusters. The ship blasted out of the hangar just as Kivas's forces opened fire. They were free. But Jason knew the truth. He wasn't human anymore. Kivas had already won. And soon, he would find out what she had done to him. A new beginning, or the end of humanity. The stolen Vathery scout ship shot through space, leaving the palace ship and its warships far behind. The silence of the void stretched endlessly ahead, but inside the cockpit, the tension was suffocating. Jason gripped the controls, his breathing shallow. His hands were shaking, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but because something inside him was changing. His skin felt hotter, like an electric current ran beneath the surface. His vision flickered, sharpening unnaturally in the dim cockpit lights. His muscles ached, but not in pain, more like they were growing stronger. Kivas had done something to him, and he had no idea what it was. The transformation begins. Zilara sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching him carefully. "You're not all right," she finally said. Jason exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "No kidding. What the hell is happening to me?" Zilara's green eyes darkened. Kivas wasn't lying. The bonding process has already started. Jason's stomach clenched. "That's impossible. I never agreed to anything." Zilara hesitated. "You didn't have to. She had access to your DNA. That's all she needed. Even after you escaped, the process continued inside you. Jason leaned forward, gripping his forehead. His skin was tingling. His heartbeat was too fast. "How do I stop it?" he asked. "Tell me there's a way to stop it." Zilara hesitated. "I don't know." Jason cursed under his breath. "There has to be a way." Zilara's expression was grim. If Kivas truly altered you at the genetic level, stopping it might be impossible. Jason's hands clenched into fists. His nails dug into his palms. And then he realized. His nails were sharper. His skin had darkened slightly, shimmering under the light. His body was already becoming something alien. His breathing hitched. He wasn't just becoming a Vaetheri hybrid. He was becoming their weapon. Return to Earth, a home no longer safe. After hours of tense travel, Earth finally came into view, a familiar blue and green sphere floating in the vast darkness. Jason had never been so relieved and terrified at the same time. But as they approached the atmosphere, something was wrong. The stolen ship's warning alarms blared. "Jason," Zilara's voice was sharp. "Something's waiting for us." Jason's heart stopped. He activated the external sensors and saw them. Vaetheri warships, dozens of them, surrounding Earth's orbit. Jason's blood ran cold. They got here first. Zilara's expression was grim. Kivas must have already begun her plan. Jason's stomach twisted. He knew what that meant. Kivas was preparing an invasion. She wasn't just after him. She was after Earth itself. A dire warning. Jason gritted his teeth. "We have to warn them." Zilara nodded. "If Earth doesn't realize what's coming, they'll be completely wiped out." Jason adjusted the controls, sending a distress signal toward Earth's nearest defense station. "U.S. Aegis, this is Jason Carter, requesting emergency contact with Global Security Command. I repeat, alien fleet in orbit. They are hostile." There was silence for a long moment. Then finally, a response crackled through the speakers. "This is General Hawthorne of Earth Defense Command. Identify yourself." Jason exhaled. "Sir, you don't have time for that. The fleet above isn't friendly. They are preparing to attack Earth." Static. Then, boom. The scout ship shook violently. Jason's eyes widened as a massive energy blast from one of the warships barely missed them. "They've spotted us," Zilara shouted. Jason's instincts kicked in. He jerked the controls, pulling the ship into a sharp dive toward Earth's atmosphere. "Hold on." The ship roared downward, flames licking against the hull as they tore through the upper layers of the atmosphere. Another energy blast fired from above. Jason twisted the controls, narrowly avoiding impact. "We won't survive another hit," Zilara warned. Jason's grip tightened. "Then let's make this landing count." The ship plummeted toward the surface, heading for the only safe place Jason could think of. The U.S. military base in Nevada. The crash landing. Jason barely managed to stabilize the ship, but the landing was violent. The stolen Vaetheri scout ship crashed through the desert landscape, skidding through sand and debris before finally grinding to a halt. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the cockpit. Jason groaned, forcing himself to sit up. His body still burned from the transformation. Zilara coughed beside him, shaking off the impact. "We made it." Jason exhaled sharply, undoing his restraints. Barely. Outside, a squad of armed soldiers was already approaching, their weapons raised. Jason pushed the cockpit hatch open and staggered out, hands up. A high-ranking officer stepped forward, General Hawthorne himself. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and cold. "Who the hell are you?" Hawthorne demanded. Jason forced himself to stand tall. "I'm the guy who just saved your asses. And I've got bad news. Earth is about to be invaded." The final revelation. The next few hours were a blur. Jason and Zilara were taken to a military bunker, where scientists immediately started running scans on Jason's changing body. The results were terrifying. His DNA was no longer fully human. He was stronger, faster, smarter. His cells were adapting, evolving. But there was something worse, something buried deep inside him. Zilara and the lead scientist exchanged a dark look as they studied the data. Finally, Zilara turned to Jason, her face pale. "Kivess didn't just alter you," she whispered. "She put a failsafe inside you." Jason's breath caught. "What?" Zilara swallowed hard. "If Kivess activates it, you won't be able to resist her anymore. You'll become what she always intended, her weapon." Jason's blood turned to ice. The transformation hadn't just made him stronger. It had made him vulnerable. And Kivess was still up there, waiting, watching. And soon, she would come to claim what was hers.